they're struggling with porn or they're struggling with sex. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is me. These guys are where I was. Now that takes you out of God designed for sex. Because now I'm using this to have sex by myself for my own gratification, my own sexual pleasure. And I'm utilizing those people. I am using them to achieve this goal. It used to be way back when you had Playboy, you had Penthouse. It was hard to get your hands on the hardcore stuff. But you know the problem today, Mark, is I click a button on my computer and I could be looking at hard stuff already. If you look at the problem with people who deal with addictions, at the heart of everything is they can't sit with emotional distress. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. They're going to see it.
Well, as you can tell, guys, we're back to the topic of pornography. Not because we really want to, but for your sake and your son's, because we need to. So buckle up. Here we go. Well, hey guys, welcome to the Next Man Up podcast. I am your host, Mark Stanifer, and I'm honored to be with you for another episode. And once again, whether you're joining us today for the first time or you've been with us for a while, we're grateful you have chosen to be part of this community that is being and raising healthy and godly men. Today, my guest is Eddie Capparucci. He's a licensed counselor specializing in treating problematic sexual behaviors, including pornography. Dr. Capparucci is the creator of the unique inner child model for the treatment of problematic sexual behaviors. He's the administrator of a few websites such as menagainstporn.org and sexuallypuremen.com. He's also written for the blogs Covenant Eyes, Kingdom Works, XXX Church, and Marriage.com. In addition to being a prominent sexual and pornography addiction therapist, he has spoken to numerous organizations regarding the harmful impact pornography has on individuals and relationships and society. He's written a few books, most recently, Why Men Struggle to Love. And I caught up with Eddie a few months ago and have been waiting for the right time to share this episode with you. And I think now is the right time. As I said in the opening segment, we don't really want to deal with this topic, but we need to. And I appreciate Eddie's willingness to be in this work, in this space, this ministry that he's doing, and to be on this show and share his experience and his story here. Okay, well, that should be enough to introduce you to Eddie Capparucci. Let's get to the conversation. Here we go. Well, Eddie, thank you, man, for coming on the show today. I appreciate your time and your expertise as we get into this gnarly topic. So thanks for being willing to rumble with it with us and our audience.
Oh, thanks, Mark. I appreciate the invite. And I always love to talk about this subject. I think, back, my mom died when I was like 27. If, she'd be like, ooh, look at my son. Look, I'm so proud of my son. And then if somebody would tell her, so what did he talk about? We talked about sex and porn. I think she'd like roll over, right?
Probably not what she was envisioning, right?
No. My son, the doctor, who talked about sex and porn.
Right. Well, Eddie, that's a great segue because I wanted to start with this question. Like this is not a topic that people wade into because they want to make a lot of money or they want to make a big name for themselves. Like this is a calling or a mission of some sort. And so I'm curious, what was it that really drew you into this pornography recovery and the sex addiction recovery space that you're working in today?
Right. Well, Mark, it definitely was a call. I myself have struggled with sex addiction since I was, 13, looking first at pornography, and then even at the age of 16, being a womanizer, just jumping from girlfriend to girlfriend, always having multiple. One was not enough. And this carried on for much of my young adult life until I was almost about 38 years old. And it actually destroyed 2 marriages because of it. And I never could understand what that was about until finally I got so tired of it. And I went and I sought some counseling, and I found out that I was suffering from an abandonment disorder. And I had an attachment disorder. My father had died when I was 5. My mother had a nervous breakdown, got shipped out to relatives who I didn't even know for almost a year. And nobody told me what's going on. Nobody told me the story. And that set in my mind, my young mind, you can't trust people who say they love you because they're not going to be there. They're not going to be dependable. So you constantly, one, don't love anyone too deeply. And 2, don't give them the opportunity to hurt you. So therefore, it was only 1 foot in, 1 foot out. So fast forward after that discovery, I wound up, I got married again, and to the woman who I'm married now. Terry and I have been married for almost 25 years. We're in ministry together. She actually is also a counselor, and she worked with women who are betrayed. Well, I had an opportunity. I was in marketing and advertising world. I worked in the pharmaceutical world for 25 years. And there was an opportunity to come down to Georgia. We lived up in New Jersey. And so we went down there. Well, that wasn't why we were called down to Georgia. We were called down there so that I could sit in a pew for the first time and hear it's about a relationship with Jesus Christ, which just blew my mind. I had no idea what this, having been raised Catholic, I went to church constantly, but I had no idea what this was about. And that began my journey, my quest to understand what does this relationship look like. And I did that for several years. And I had some wonderful mentors along the way. And then all of a sudden, God comes and says, hey, guess what? We're not doing this anymore. We're not doing your advertising and marketing gig anymore. And I'm like, no, wait a second. I don't like this. This isn't part of the deal. I was going to get close to you, but I like what I do. I have a high level position. I make a lot of money. I have a lot of perks. This is a good gig. He goes, no, we're not doing this. And I fought him. I fought him for about 2 years. Wow. Until finally, my wife had a wonderful time watching it from the sidelines.
Of course,
laughing the whole
she
time.
Knew how it was going to play out. She was just...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she knew. I didn't know. She knew.
Right.
I tried compromising. I tried bargaining. I did everything. It didn't work. And then finally, I succumbed and I said, fine. And I went back to school, got my master's, another master's degree, this time in counseling, did all the state work for all the hours that you need to get certified and get your license. And then I opened up my own practice about over 10 years ago.
Wow.
And it was like, okay. And now I'm seeing everybody. I see people with depression. I'm seeing people with anxiety, seeing people who are struggling with marriage issues. And then all of a sudden these guys start coming in my office. Well, actually, they were being dragged into my office by their wives or girlfriend about they're struggling with porn or they're struggling with sex. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is me. These guys are where I was. So I went and I got more certification on training with the area of sex addiction and pornography addiction. And all of a sudden, it was like the floodgates opened. And since then, he had blessed our ministry. But more importantly, we get to see God at work every day, changing people, changing couples, and helping relationships. That's the brief story.
Yeah, no, it's so. I'll choose my words carefully here. This is a major problem, and we're going to unpack the major problem. At the same time, it's so cool to see how God invited you into this space and then revealed to you that you were looking at yourself 10, 15 years ago as these guys were coming into your office. And it seems like maybe that's the moment when you realized, oh, this is where this journey has been leading me and where we're going to go. I could be putting words in your mouth.
No, you're not putting words in my mouth at all. You were absolutely right. That was it. It was like, this is okay. Now I understand what this is all about, because having been in the shoes of these men, I mean, I can relate. I know how they feel. I know how they feel, even if they don't know how they feel, because I've been through the whole process. And therefore, it just makes it so much easier for me to relate and understand a lot of the pain and anguish they're going through, along with what also their betrayed partners are going through.
So I'm not surprised that that's part of your story, although I didn't know that. I'm not surprised that that's how God wove the past, all the different experiences in your past, positive and negative, into the work that you're doing to help guys today. It's so cool to just see how He does that. And
certainly is. Don't quite understand it at times. It's like, why can't you just tell me the whole story at the very beginning where it's supposed to go?
Yeah, well, I have my own theory, at least for me, on that if I knew the whole story, given how I'm wired and my own tendencies toward fear and safety and security, that I would be in the corner in the fetal position rocking if I knew what was coming. Because in order to address what's coming, I've got to go through what's happening so that I'm ready. It's no different than training to summit a mountain. You don't just hop off the couch and go. You've got to go through the discipline. And so anyway, at least it's probably not just me, but I know that would apply to me. If I saw what was coming, I would probably just grip up in fear because I just don't feel ready.
You're far from alone.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about. I want to spend some time, I guess, in defining terms and teasing some of that out, because I know when it comes to pornography or to sex, sometimes referring to it as an addiction is controversial. Maybe that's only in the church space, in the Christian space, but I know there's been some controversy around labeling it as an addiction. And yet you're not shy in using the term at all. So I wonder if you could just give us a simple definition of addiction with respect to pornography and sex addiction. What does that mean for you?
Well, it means the same thing as it does with any type of addiction. What it is, it becomes a force within your life that winds up having devastating consequences in various other areas of your life. So therefore, it'll impact relationships, it'll impact your work, could impact your school. So it floods out into other areas. That's what an addiction is. It's the problem I have that now spills over into other areas of my life.
So why do you think there's been the controversy in the Christian space over whether to put the term addiction on this or not? Where is that coming from?
Well, there's two things. One, it's not just in the Christian space. It's actually in our space, too, from a clinician standpoint. There are many clinicians who do not want to recognize it as an addiction. From a Christian standpoint, the belief is that we're giving the person an out. That what it is, because those are the folks, from a Christian perspective, it is, no, this is a sin. It has to be treated like a sin. And if you're saying it's an addiction, if you're going to use the disease model of addiction, which is what AA has done for alcoholism, it's a disease, then they're saying you've given them an out from their behavior, if an excuse. I don't see anything of it as an excuse. Okay, this is not an excuse. The fact that you've had this addiction, all right, you still have choices. You could have went somewhere and got help, and you elected not to. Okay, because people understand that if I'm married and I decide to have an affair on my wife, I know that's wrong. I know that's wrong. So if I'm going to have multiple affairs, I know it's wrong. I have that choice to say, "Ooh, wait a second, I need to stop and I need to go and seek help." See, I never sought help for it because I just didn't take the time to process through to think, what are the consequences of my behavior? I was more inwardly focused. All I know is that I wanted what I wanted. Okay, but yet I still had a choice and I didn't make it.
So the choice piece there is how you still equate the challenges that are related to an addiction or an addictive behavior, but then place the onus and the responsibility back on the person to arrest that behavior.
That's exactly correct. That's exactly right. Because you know what? There were times as I went through my addictions that, I had those moments where it was like I was being convicted. Like, you know what? This isn't right. I don't feel good about what I'm doing here. But then, boom, here came the next opportunity. And I should have taken during those times of remorse. That is when I should have taken action to do something.
Yeah. So let's keep the defining going, if you would, because this is another angle that I'm curious about exploring, and that is, how do we define pornography? Because I imagine our listeners are picturing lots of different things. I'm sure some of our listeners are dealing with this very issue. If the statistics are true, then that is the case. But can we create a definition of pornography? At least the working definition that you use in your work.
Yeah, what I look at pornography, what I look at is anything that is being done in which people are being objectified. We're not seeing them as individuals. We're seeing them as parts. And
so that's that's broad. So keep going, because that's a very broad.
It is broad.
Yeah.
It is broad. But let's look at classic artwork. Okay, and let's look at like the nudes. Now, what we were looking at many of those cases, we are looking at the beauty of a woman. That was the artist's interpretation of that woman. And that's what we're looking at. We're looking at that beauty of the woman through the eyes of that artist. Okay, I don't think of that as porn. But yet, when I'm looking at two people or multiple people who are having sex together, okay, they're having sex. That's what pornography is about. It's about engaging in sex acts together. Where is the beauty in that? Where's the beauty? The beauty can be between the two people together, in their own world doing that. That's what God's design is. Two individuals together engaging in sex, using one of his gifts that he's given us. But now we're watching this and we're being voyeurs, looking at it. Why? Because we're seeking our own sense of self-gratification and sexual gratification. Now that takes you out of God's design for sex. Because now I'm using this to have sex by myself for my own gratification, my own sexual pleasure. And I'm utilizing those people. I am using them to achieve this goal.
So let me give you an example. I'm tracking with you. Let me give you an example that's real from my life, and my guess is real for many of our listeners. The Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition magazine.
Right.
I remember being in college and getting my hands on one of those, and I was certainly appreciating the beauty of the models who were in that.
Right.
But it wasn't for the beauty that God created. It was for the my own pleasure, right? And gratification. So like that's an example of something that may or may not fit into a porn definition, but could also still be problematic. Yes?
Yes. That is not pornography. Okay. But however, if someone has an issue with being able to, with a problem of objectifying women, yes, that swimsuit issue is going to be problematic. There are many guys who could look through that swimsuit issue and just have said, wow, that's attractive. That's a nice bathing suit. Hey, honey, I'd like this suit on you. And they're not using it from a sexual standpoint. They're not. But there are others who are. But no, that is not pornography because we're not engaging in sexual activity. However, are there guys who sometimes they play on the edge over there and say, ooh, this is good, but now I need more, because that's what's going to happen eventually. Or they've been in pornography, they've gone through recovery, and now they go back just looking for bikini pictures, thinking, oh, I'm being safe. I'm not looking at porn.
Because it's not quote unquote porn.
No, porn, correct. But they're using it the same way they were using pornography. So again, you're talking about something, Mark, that's not black and white.
Yeah.
It's gray. It is gray. And it really comes down to what is in a man's heart. That's what it really comes down to.
Yeah, the word that's come into my mind is motive. What is the motive behind what you are looking at, what you are doing? And
yes.
And so that requires a lot of self-awareness and a lot of courage to face that ugly motive that you would prefer to just not face, right?
We don't want to look at that. We don't want to look at any of that. And if you look at the problem with people who deal with addictions, at the heart of everything is they can't sit with emotional distress. They can't sit with emotional pain. And they learn from a very young age that, you know what, I'm not going to think about it. And they find something to distract themselves from that pain. And they find all different types of things to use that become obsessive and addiction. And as I say, that then spills over into other periods of other parts of their lives.
So that's the common thread across all addictions, is avoiding this emotional distress and then, just kind of checking out from dealing with that thing, right?
Right, that's correct.
But I know you and others believe that porn addiction, sex addiction is different than other addictions because of what it leads to. Talk more about that. What do you...
I actually don't think it's very different than some of my peers do. I think, for me, addiction's addiction. Because again, I am locked into something that I find difficult to control, and it is bringing serious consequences into other parts of my life. Now, the difference with this is that, in a way, and in some ways it's not different, but like, for example, let's say you have an exercise addiction. Some people do, all right? And the exercising that they have to do so often is winds up playing havoc on what they need to do within their relationship or with work or with school, okay? They have a certain routine and they just stick to that routine constantly. When it comes to pornography, however, what happens is we reach a point of tolerance. So therefore, I'm looking at a certain genre, I'm looking at a certain type of porn, and then all of a sudden, It's just not that stimulating anymore.
Mm.
So what I need is, I don't need more. I need different. I need different. So now I have to go to the next genre, and then the next one, and the next one. And for others, it becomes, ooh, you know what? It isn't exciting watching it anymore. I want to engage in it. And now seeking outside to find more. And that way it's different, because usually, when it comes to, addictions, like, with drugs, what they're looking for in many times is they're looking for more, not so much different.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the same thing with alcohol. I need more of it than I do need different.
And yet in the porn path, and this is not everybody's path, but you can clearly trace the from little and quote unquote soft to harder to then actual physical acts with another person to meet that need, right? That's where that tolerance gets met, and they've got to go look for more and or different. And,
Right.
and it just leads down a pretty destructive path.
That was a real good, very clear-cut model that we had before. But the problem today, Mark, is I click a button on my computer and I could be looking at hard stuff already.
Mm.
It used to be way back when you had Playboy, you had Penthouse. It was hard to get your hands on the hardcore stuff. Now, hardcore stuff is all around. So younger people looking, who stumble across porn, they're stumbling across the hard stuff now. They're not even looking at the soft. They're here in the more advanced already, which just again means that they're most likely going to escalate quicker.
Yeah. Yeah. When you think about the problem that we're talking about, and this is kind of a general, wide open question. I'm curious your answer here. But what is it that we as guys, we as God followers, the church leaders, this space, what is it that we've gotten wrong in our understanding or in our reaction to this thing that is porn and the problem that it represents?
If we're not talking about it, that's the problem. If you look at the numbers and statistics, they show that if you look at believers versus non-believers, the usage is about the same. There's no difference. But in a church setting, nobody's really talking about the impact that this is having on individuals, couples, and society. And therefore, so what we've done is we've just kept it in the dark. And people who struggle with pornography, for the most part, they keep it in the dark. They're not running out and sharing with their friends, about, oh, let me show you this latest porn video. Now, the younger kids are doing that. Okay, the kids are 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. They're doing that stuff. Hey, did you see this video? Did you see that video? But for the most part, we keep it hidden. And because we keep it hidden, we're just pretending, it's not a big problem. It's not a big deal. There's also the idea that, it's what every guy does.
It's just guys
every
being
guy
guys.
Does it. And first and foremost, it's not even true. And there's a higher level of men who may look at porn once a month, 4 or 5 times a year for 10, 15 minutes because they stumble across something, but they're not continuing to go back to it. And then let's look at the number of women who are now starting to look at porn. And that number is rising and increasing at dramatic rates.
So that dovetails well into a bit of a shift and a question I wanted to ask you. When we were talking before preparing for this episode, you mentioned something that I thought was interesting. You said your secret is not really a secret. Despite you think that you're keeping this behavior, this addiction to yourself, it's not really so secretive. Will you just expand on what you mean by that? Obviously, we're kind of talking to that person who's like, oh boy, this is me. I have this problem, and nobody knows I'm managing it.
Right.
What expand on that? What do you mean by it's not so secret?
What I mean by that, Mark, it's not so much that people do know. Okay, it's not it. But what it is that there's something different about you. Where you could be out socializing with people and friends, you're more likely passing on those, and therefore wanting to isolate yourself to spend time with porn. Okay, that could be one of the things. Where as your wife is approaching you, like, hey, how about tonight? No, not really in the mood, because you've just gone through a period of watching porn and masturbating. So people are picking up that there's something different. There's something odd that's going on here, with this person. What is changing? What is happening? So people are getting that sense, and especially you hear that a lot from women who, once the pornography is exposed, they're like, I knew there was something. He just wasn't the same. There was too much in the way of isolation. There was too much. Think part of what it does, especially in a family dynamic, it creates shame. Okay, so it's like, honey, it's really time to talk to the boys about, sex and what has to happen. Yeah, no, you're right. We'll do that. I'll take care of that. And you said you were going to talk to the boys. Not going to be. No, I will. I'll get there. Kind of hard to go and have that conversation when you know what you're doing.
That's right.
So there's different things that are happening that people see that say there's something different. That's what I mean about your secret.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's just behavior's a little off, like especially the folks that would know us the best.
Yeah.
Would sense the behavior's off, or the time allocation is a little bit different, and I can imagine. The clients that your wife sees are really, really sensing that something's not quite right, and could even be thinking lots of different things. But that's what I'm hearing you say, is that while
Yes.
people may not know exactly what's going on, they're aware that something has changed, something's likely going on,
Correct.
and yet that shame, the thing that would represent the lifeline, talking about it and bringing it into the light, is the very thing that scares the addict from doing. Because that shame voice is in their head, and holding
shame
it back.
is the biggest deterrent in helping someone to manage their addiction. It is that shame, and that's why one of the first things we try to work through with clients as we're going through the process is to help them deal with that shame, to understand that, look, you know what? If you are remorseful, if you bring it to God, you are forgiven for what has happened. And he does not see you as shameful. He sees you as broken. Okay, he understands your brokenness, but yet he still loves and accepts you unconditionally. And here you have a wife who is sitting here, and even though she's hurting, she's not running away from you. And it's those the kind of things that we try to lessen the shame so that they can focus on what they need to focus on in order to manage the addiction.
It's interesting that shame is such a prevailing issue, whether it's addiction or whether it is a sense of I'm not man enough, or I have to ask for help, or right, like it plays itself out in so many different ways. In fact, you can go all the way back to the story of the first Adam. And what happened there was he made a mistake, made a choice that was counter to what God wanted. And his first reaction was, I'm going to hide because I feel ashamed.
Yes, that's exactly right. right? You got to find something to put on.
That's right.
But I believe shame is one of Satan's greatest tools. That it really keeps us stuck. It keeps me from wanting to seek out help because of fear of the embarrassment, fear of the stigma that would come with it.
And yet the stats would tell us that you're not alone. You're not the only one. There are tons and tons of guys struggling with this very issue. And yet that shame voice holds us back. I mean, right. I would agree with you. It's an extremely powerful weapon the enemy uses to keep us bound up in that shame. And then the destructive effects that has on us and those around us as a result.
Yeah. And that's why when men get into treatment, one of the first things we're doing is we're putting them in groups because we want them to be surrounded by people who I'm not alone. Universality, we call it. I'm not alone. All right. Others. I remember I had one client, he was even an attorney. And when I was talking to him about group, he's like, I don't think I want to go to a group. I go, you need to be in group. You need to be there. If you're not a group, I can't work with you. I'll have to send you somewhere. All right, I'll go. He came back and I said, so how was the group? He goes, it was very different than I thought it was going to be. He goes, I was expecting all these guys sitting around with these trench coats, these kind of derelict looking people. And there's all these people from every walk of life, professional, blue collar people, teachers, police officers. I go, yeah, because it doesn't discriminate.
That's right.
Young people, old people. So there were people in there in their 70s. Yes. That's the value of group that people can see. Okay, well, I'm not odd. There are other people who are dealing with this.
Wow. Yeah. So let's keep going on the recovery theme, because one of the things that is at least representative of your work with men, I don't know that it's unique to you, but it's part of your distinction, is this idea of the inner child. And talk about that for a minute. What does that mean? Where does that come from? What does that look like in the context of helping guys through this recovery process?
Right. It is unique. I created the inner child model for the treatment of sex and pornography addiction. What I've been doing now is I've been training other clinicians that they could use the same very valuable tool. And basically, what it is, I believe that the road to recovery goes through our childhood. And what I mean by that, I believe it's unresolved childhood pain point that still haunt us today that we're just not really aware of. You brought up a couple things just a moment ago and not even realizing that fit in perfectly with the inner child. But it's the negative narrative that we tell ourselves that I'm just not good enough. I'm not man enough. I'm not smart enough. And we learned them somewhere. We weren't born with these negative narratives. We didn't come out of the womb thinking, oh, you know what a wretched young boy I am. Okay, that's not it. There were people and events that directly or indirectly communicated these negative events to us, the negative thought to us. And it could have been done whether through abuse or perhaps neglect. So with the inner child process, what I'm doing is I'm going back and identifying what are those core emotional pain points that today a negative event happens and it matches up with something from the past. And then you have these two worlds that collide together. So I'll give you a quick little example. Okay, let's say you had a really good friend and you guys had a fallout. And one day you run into each other on the street and you just start talking. You said, maybe we should get together and just see if we can work this out. Great. Well, the day comes, you're going to have lunch. And he calls like about an hour before and says, look, something happened. I can't make it. I'll have to get back to you. I'll talk to you later. And just hangs up. And you're like, wow, that was pretty abrupt. What? I think like did he just blow me off? And I'm feeling kind of rejected by all of that. Well, your inner child, all right, he goes into a storage unit and he pulls out an event of when you were 11 years old and you went down to Bobby's house, see if he could come out to play. And you knock on his door and Bobby opens the door and you see three of your other friends there. And you're like, hey, what are you guys doing? He goes, oh, we're just hanging out. He goes, why didn't you call me? We didn't think about it. Well, can I come in? No, my mom says I can't have anybody else, and slams the door in your face. And they're walking home. You got tear running down your eye. You're upset. How come nobody cared? They're not. I thought they were my friends. How come they didn't call me? All this rejection. So now the phone call that you had received from this guy for lunch, canceling, which had brought your anxiety level here, your kid is running in the background with his own thoughts about what has happened in the past. And now your anxiety level goes up here. And you're not aware of it. We're unaware of it. It's been repressed. So what happens is now this pain point becomes a little bit unbearable. And I want to run away. I don't want to sit with it. And now here I am off running. Let me go grab my phone so I can look at porn. Let me go through Tinder to see if I can do a hookup, whatever it may be. And then you get done and you're like, what the heck happened?
Right.
Why did I do that? And it's because our inner child, which we're not aware of, which we need to know what is it that haunts that kid. So my clients are learning about what are the core emotional triggers that activate their child. And if once they know those, when anything happens, an event happens, they can look at that and say, ooh, does that match up with one of my 6 or 7, core emotional triggers? And if it does, put out the yellow flags, because the kid's now going to be trying to get activated. And then there's other steps that can help them to de-escalate.
So what's interesting is I'm comparing to what I've learned in the last few years, and before your description, the way I would have said it is today's event triggers you emotionally. The brain says, oh, I've seen this movie before, calls up that script, and then, not to imply that there's no control here, but then says, I know how we dealt with this back then. Let me go back and load up that programming, and we'll deal with it the same way. Whether it's the same event or not, the way I would have described it is the brain sees the similarities and says, oh, I know how to keep you safe. I know how to fix this situation so that you don't have to feel the pain, or that you can cope with it.
You're right, Mark. There's a lot of similarity to that, because the kid is saying, I've seen this play out.
Yeah.
I know. The problem with the kid is what he pulls out of the storage unit usually doesn't match up with what's happened. They're not really the same thing. Okay. And if I take you through the rest of that process for a moment, because what I need to do is I'd have to be able to sit with that discomfort I have right now and say, okay, so this really sucked. I feel like I've been rejected. But what I have to do, instead of just running away, I have to use wise mind. Well, was I rejected? Did he really blow me off? I feel that way. That's what I feel. But what is real? And if we think about it, I don't know. I don't have all the information.
Right.
I'm just guessing right now. Well, guessing isn't really a good thing to do. So now I go to my next step, which is like, okay, what's the right thing to do? You know what? I'm going to give him a couple of days, and I'm going to give him a call, and I'm going to see, how's he doing? Everything go okay? And if he want to reschedule. And if he says yes, great. If he says no, then I'm going to probe a little bit more and say, well, you need a little bit more time before we try to get together. If you do, that's fine. We'll do that. And that's the adult way of handling it. We don't deal with it in an adult manner. We deal with it with an adolescent mind.
Yeah. And even if in that adolescence, how we dealt with it helped us to cope and keep us safe, so to speak, through that situation, at some point that tool no longer works for us, even if we keep going back to it. I can see you shaking your head. It's like that worked for a time, but we need to mature past that so that we have tools that work better for us today, because we're not that little kid anymore today, even though the emotion and the feeling is very similar.
You hit the nail on the head. What it is about, it's about emotional immaturity to be able to deal with distress. We just don't have the tool because nobody showed us. They didn't show us how to deal with emotional distress in the right way, in a positive way. So as a child, okay, I don't have a lot of worldly experiences. Okay, I use more of my emotional thinking part of my brain, the limbic system, than I do my prefrontal cortex, which is the rational part. So what's my conclusion? What do I do with the pain? I won't think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then how do I not think about it? Ooh, too much TV, too much food, too much video game, too much boom, boom, boom. And I'm distracting myself.
Yep.
We learn it from a young age and we take the same thing into our adult world. We haven't changed. We are emotionally immature when it comes with our ability to sit with distress.
So here we come full circle back to one of the things that is a continual problem for males is dealing with emotions. And we've inherited a lot of straitjackets from culture or from our fathers or the other men in our lives. And I guess what I hear you saying is that one of the evidences of our emotional immaturity, our lack of emotional intelligence, is the porn epidemic that we're dealing with today.
Yeah, well, that's the consequence of
it.
And what we're touching upon now is the new book that I'm writing, which will be out early next year, Why Men Struggle to Love. And it is about our inability to be able to emotionally connect. And I've identified 14 what I call blind spots that are there. We're very inwardly focused. We lack curiosity, those types of things. So yes, that's a big problem too. And 9 out of 10 men who I work with have a very low emotional IQ.
What's the title of that book going to be again?
It is called Why Men Struggle to Love.
Interesting.
And it is unlocking the blind spots.
Okay. All right. So we've been hitting on this topic for a bit. If one of our listeners who is struggling here is still with us, I can imagine his question to be like, what do I do? Like, how do I get out of this? What is that? What do I need to do? What's the next best step for me to start on this road to recovery? How do you answer that question?
Yeah. First and foremost, it is to be able to have the courage to acknowledge that you need help, okay? And to be able to go out and reach for help. And what I'd be doing is I'd be looking for someone who is certified, a counselor or a social worker who is certified in the area of a sexual addiction and pornography addiction. You want to be dealing with someone who knows this subject and will give you and will understand the shame and the other emotions that you're dealing with. So that's the first step that you want to do. Find a competent professional who can help you. The second step is that you are going to want to get in community. You're going to want to be part of a group along the way so that therefore you can walk with them. They become your brothers in a way. They're there to give support and all of it. The other thing is we're going to have to try to lock down we have to get rid of the source. So therefore we have to start locking down devices. And we have to look at putting software on those that if you were to go to, a website you shouldn't be to, that a report going to get generated. Somebody's going to have it, not so they can get on the phone and yell at you, but to hold you accountable, to say what's going on.
Yeah.
Right. And then the last thing I say is just, again, to put trust in God, that there is help, there is the ability to heal, and that there are good people out there who can help you walk along that path.
So now answer a similar question to the father. And maybe we can go a couple different ways here. How does the father begin to introduce the concerns around pornography? And what should a father be looking for, or what if he sees some signs and has some concern? How do you advise that father to engage with his son?
Yeah, I think it's just not fathers, but moms too. Moms have that radar up. Also, if we're starting to see a child wanting to isolate more, okay, that's a pretty big sign. If we start seeing that grades are falling off of things and they're not putting all their effort into the homework, that could be a sign too. But the first and foremost, what parents need to do is they need to monitor their kids' electronics. Okay, you got to put a time. There have to be a time period that they can use it for. That to be a limited amount of time per day, and you need to put software on it. So therefore, if they download an app, if they go to a website, the text they're getting, the emails they're getting, you see it. And it'd be like, well, even that that's violating their privacy. You know what? Sorry, they don't have privacy yet. Okay, and the reason for this is the fact that they have minds that can be easily swayed, and they don't understand all the evil that lies out there in the world. You are here to protect them. You're not here to be their best friend. You're there to be a parent, and a good parent protects, a good friend protects in that regard. So I think that's part of it. But then talking to your kids, I think first and foremost it's about it just being honest and being real. We don't want to sugarcoat that. It's like, the fact is, hey, you know what? Your friends may come to you and show you pictures of people without their clothes on, or people engaging in things that a couple who are married should be doing. If that happens, I really would like you to come to me and let me know. Okay? Because I think it's important. You're not going to get in trouble at all, but I need you to know. And there are also some really good resources that are out there that parents can tap into. I think one is called Dangerous Pictures. I think that might not be the right name, but there's one that's out there, and it's a book that parents can walk through, the idea of pornography and the trouble with it on their own.
So I heard a guy who has a recognizable name in a podcast that he hosts suggest to other dads that they do what he's done with his boy. And maybe, I know he's got more than one child. Anyway, he offered his son money for as an incentive to bring to him the bad pictures that he was exposed to. And of course, they had a conversation around, and maybe the book that you're referring to is Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. Yes,
that's it. Good Pictures, Bad Pictures.
Yeah, that title was coming to mind. But basically, he said, here's what represents a bad picture, and I'll give you $50 or $100 if one of your friends ever shows you this and you come back and tell me. And
that's good.
My first reaction was, well, that's interesting. But the point that he was trying to make to his boy is, I want to be that safe space for you to come and talk to me about what's out there, because this stuff is out there. I want you to be prepared. I want you to be aware, but I also want you to know you can come talk with me.
That's the most important part. They have to believe that they can trust you. That's what I mean. If they bring it to you or come home and tell you, it's like, why did you look at that? You shouldn't have even looked at it. It's like, That's not going to help. And even if you find that they're looking at it, okay, you have to be, okay, wait, we have to have a conversation about this. Let's go and let's talk. Let me tell you why it's not appropriate. Let me tell you about the dangers that, you can deal with later in life, now and later in life with this. And again, it is about, you're absolutely right, creating a safe haven, not lecturing, like we don't do that kind of stuff. That's wrong, blah, blah. No, it has to be, there's a reason for not looking at this, and it is because it's not healthy for you. And let me explain why.
When my kids were younger, I think I couldn't have described it with these words back then, but I think really my philosophy was I want to do everything I can to keep them from exposure, and exposure is not gonna happen on my watch. Now I think a decade and change later, I think my philosophy would be, were I to go through it again, to assume that exposure at some point is going to happen, and to talk about it, to normalize the conversation about it, without normalizing the behavior piece of it, but normalize the conversation like this is out there, it's going to happen, and I want you to be prepared, and I want you to be strong, and I want you to be equipped. But just know it's likely to happen at some point. You're going to see bad pictures, and come talk to me about it. I think today, boy, it'd be nice to go back and do it again with today's wisdom and today's understanding. Of course, I don't get that opportunity, but I think today that's how I would approach it as a dad whose kids are growing into that age where statistics tell us they're likely to receive their first exposure.
Yes, I mean, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. They're going to see it, and if they don't see it at home because you've done everything right, okay, you put a time limit, you put the blocks on there, you've had the conversation, you've talked about it, you've made it a safe haven for them, they're going to see it out there. They're going to be exposed. They're going to be at somebody's house and somebody's going to show them something. They're going to be at somebody's house and they're going to put something on television. It's going to happen. And they need to be able to come back and talk about that and feel safe about that.
Yeah, that's good. Well, Eddie, I appreciate your experience and your candor, your willingness to step into the call, even though it took you a couple years to agree that this was the direction God wanted you to go. I know that there are listeners in this audience that you're talking to, that are in the situation of they want to take a step forward. I know you have some resources available. You've got some contact type of information. How can guys get a hold of those resources, or just make that next connection point?
Right. If they go to www.innerchild-sexaddiction.com, again, innerchild-sexaddiction.com. There's a website there that explained more about the inner child model, how it worked. There's also a directory of clinicians who have been trained in the inner child model. And also you can get a copy of the book, Going Deeper, How the Inner Child Impacts Your Sexual Addiction. And you can get that on Amazon. So those are the two sources that I would send people to.
That's fantastic. And guys, as always, I'll make sure that information's in the show notes too. But there you have it. From the man himself, thank you once again for your courage to be in this space, for the impact that you're making, and for the time today to share this with our listeners, and to encourage me and encourage all of us to keep going in this battle to become more emotionally intelligent, to put shame in its place, and to move past these nasty, gnarly addictions like pornography. So thank you, man. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you again for giving me the opportunity. And thank you, Mark, for the wonderful work you do in helping to educate men to make stronger men. It is so needed. We need those resources. We need a lot, even myself, we need that encouragement because the world comes at us pretty hard. So thank you for what you do. And God bless you.
Yeah, thanks, man. Well, guys, I don't know what your challenge or your struggle is around the issue of pornography or sexual addiction. But if the statistics are true, there are many of you listening right now that are dealing with this very thing in your own life. And chances are your sons are dealing with it as well. Or if they haven't already, as Eddie said, it's not a matter of if, it's just simply a matter of when. So I hope what you take away from this conversation is really two things. The first is just simply acknowledging that this is a challenge and we need to be up to the challenge. We need to address the challenge in our own lives, and we need to help our boys to navigate through this challenge as well. And the second thing is, I hope you find inspiration that there is hope, that you can be free from the challenge, from the addiction, from the shame, and from being locked up in this struggle with this addiction. You can be free. Whether you look at the resources provided here from Eddie or the other conversations that we've shared through the years in our episodes, you can go to our podcast page, thenextmanup.com/podcast, and do a search in the search bar for porn, and you'll find some of the other conversations as well as the resources that we've provided in those conversations to have access to. There is help, but it starts with acknowledging that there's a problem and then asking for help. So again, two things: acknowledge that this is something we need to deal with, and find inspiration that there is hope to overcome. That's what I hope you guys take away from this conversation. My thanks again to Eddie for sharing his story, for sharing his wisdom, for doing the work that he's doing, and for sharing that with us here. I appreciate his willingness to be on this show and to fight the fight for you and for me and for the next generation of men coming behind us. Okay, guys, that's it for today. Once again, if you got any feedback for us, that's our email, feedback at thenextmanup.com is where you can get us. We'd love to hear from you. That's all for now. Until next week, guys, adios. To send us your comments or questions, you can email us at feedback@thenextmanup.com. The theme music is by Jacob Stanifer at Jacob Stanifer Music. And this show is part of the NRT Podcast Network.